خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذي أذهب الله عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي فوض أمري إلى الله بصير بالعباد. Welcome everyone to our Quran session. Inshallah, we hope to find some peace and tranquility for our hearts through this beautiful book of light. And we are discussing Surah Fatiha, and we are on the ayat of the Quran where Allah is giving us His two beautiful names. And we have been discussing these two names again and again because we first discussed Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and then we started the surah Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar Rahmanir Rahim. So these beginning ayat of Surah Fatiha are not only the opening of the opening, they are the opening of the surah, which is an opening. They're also they're teaching us the way of connecting to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala and the sequence in the way this conversation happens. And this surah, Surah Al-Fatiha, is called Sabal Mathani. It is 7. And so the 7 oft repeated ayat. So these are the 7 verses that set the tone, summarize the Quran, teaches the sequence of conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are the summary, according to a lot of scholars, of the Quran, in the sense that the whole Quran has been summarized into this surah. So we can say that the whole Quran is based on these 7 themes of the 7 ayat. Today we are doing the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Ar Raheem, and I'm going to read from the book The Divine Names by Rosina Fawzia Al-Ravi. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, the most compassionate, the most kind, the merciful, the performer of blessed deeds, the most gracious. Okay. Mercy encompasses compassion, sympathy, and the ability to forgive. There is a form of mercy that manifests before the need for it arises. A compassion that flows continuously from the divine to all creatures, protecting, preserving, and guiding them to the light and to a higher life. Ar Raheem is the ebb that takes us back to our origin. It is the grace that enables us to grow beyond our human and earthly limitations so that we may breathe the paradise of unity, wisdom, knowledge, and balance our basic qualities of our deep being. In Sufism, the ocean symbolizes unity, whereby Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim are like ebb and flow. Allah has sent us tidal waves from the sea of infinity to the shores of our finite world through the revelations of His messengers. Sufism is the longing to throw ourselves into this wave and to let it sweep us back to our infinite source, our boundless origin. Before I go forward, I don't want to lose the train of thoughts, and I would like to share with you that, the first line, it says that there is a form of mercy that manifests before the need for it arises. And later on, it says that this is the grace that enables us to grow beyond our human and earthly limitations. So, this was about Ar-Rahman, right? And so, of course, these two names are very closely connected because of their root words. We have discussed the difference between Rahman and Rahim earlier as well, and I'm going to repeat it soon from the book, The Secrets of Divine Love. I'm going to share that again because I find it so relevant, and reminders like these are never enough. What I want to say here is that we have to have compassion for ourselves to be able to give ourselves that space where we can truly be forgiving and accepting of ourselves. And a lot of times this ability to open ourselves up for ourselves, this ability to accept ourselves, can open the doors of deeper understanding of the self, because this is a journey of self knowledge and self discovery, self exploration, because we constantly rely on the hadith, which says that if you know yourself, you can know your Rabb. And what is interesting is that in the Quran also, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word Rabbi, as in we've heard the dua, Rabbi Didni ilma, right? So Allah uses this word Rabbi, my Rabb, and then there is Musa's Rabb, and then there is your Rabb, and there are all these different ways in which Allah is taking our attention to Him. And according to some scholars, that happens because, like Rumi says, there are as many paths to God as many there are um, breaths. And what we realize is that each one of us will have our own journey and path to God, which is going to be unique and different. And its uniqueness and its specialty, as in the special connection or relationship that I will have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is determined by how much I can do this connection from my heart. And just like a mother has two children, three children, however many children, we realize as adults today that the connection of each child with their parent is going to be different, because each child is different and each child's inclinations, likes, dislikes, um, personality constitution are different. Our modes of communication are different and our modes of expression are different. So some will express love through service in action, some will do it through words, and some may not be able to express love but be of needy of love. So we see that a lot of times we as people struggle over here, as it says that, a mercy that manifests before the need for it arises. Now we all know that the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always surrounding it, right? It's always there. And I was talking to a beautiful friend yesterday, and she was explaining this to me about herself and um, her late husband very beautifully. And she said that um, for her, the connection with her Allah is very ritualistic. She needs to do her, certain rituals, maybe tahajjud, maybe reading certain du'as and surahs, and making her schedule very disciplined with those rituals, and that feels her ground makes her feel grounded, connected, centered, gives her the space. But then there will be some people who are so connected in a different way that they are in a state of connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are in a state of joy. They have that intrinsic auto connection, which is very um, effortless, basically. And the example she gave was, she said that, probably he was an upgraded model. So he was connected to Allah like the Wi Fi we have these days. Automatically, you're just connected to the internet all the time. But if you remember long ago, we used to have those modems, and then we had to, choose the connection, and then the modem would make these sounds, and then in the end, you would be like, okay, now the connection is made. And I found it so beautiful that a lot of us are like that. We need to do a very conscious effort to get into a place of connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while for others it may look very effortless. And therefore, what is important here to understand is that all of us within our hearts um, are looking for that deep individual connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that connection comes when we allow ourselves to be. We allow to accept ourselves as we are with our own limitations. And when guilt and shame and remorse and regret comes into the picture, it starts to create a block. It starts to make us scared of going into that place and saying, what is causing this? What is this? I don't know what this is, right? And there's this fear of the unknown. We don't know what I'm going to find when I go inside, and it's going to be painful, and we all want to run away from pain. So, this mercy and grace that enables us to grow beyond our human and earthly limitation has to be a kindness which is beyond being right. Okay. Um, and so the idea is that a lot of times the kind of upbringing we were given, because I come from that background, and with the kind of feedback I get, I know a lot of people have also had that kind of religious upbringing or exposure, where everything was about right and wrong, everything was about halal and haram, and everything became black and white. And black and white structuredness kind of stifles our flow, right? It stifles our fluidity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It takes away that ease of connection, which is what I was talking about. It takes away that ease of effortless connection. And then a lot of us, maybe intrinsically, maybe by nature, we are like that, like the way my friend was saying, but maybe it was something about our upbringing that created that super structuredness to a connection and a relationship. We all know within friends, between lovers, between husband and wife, between children, too much structuredness can get in the way of being expressive, being accepted. And so when we become the kind of people who choose right over being kind, we are doing a kind of a disservice to not only others around us, but to ourselves as well, because we know that as human beings, we will always be full of limitations, flaws, mistakes, and we have a mess. And whether we want it or not, our childhood is the perfect um, sowing ground of the challenges that are going to come later in our lives. They become the setting of the tone of the work we will be doing on our souls in the coming years of our life, where we have to go back and have the courage to look at that baggage, that that collection of um, challenges emotionally that we have to work on. And so, what Raheem reminds me, and of course Rahman too, but what Raheem really reminds me is from Rosina, is from the book Secrets of Divine Love, and I'm just going to read it from my computer, but I won't be able to share it just as yet because it'll just won't my entire presentation will go away. So I'm just going to read it if you can bear with me. Um, and I want to read out what she's saying because it's a reminder what she's saying about Ar Rahim. So she says that um, while Ar Rahim is seen as God's qualities of love and mercy in action, Ar Rahman is God's nature of mercy, love, and grace. So while Ar Rahim is seen as God's qualities of love and mercy in action, Ar Rahman is God's nature of mercy, love, and grace. Ar Rahim is a specified form of mercy that is given to those who open their hearts to God, longing for the light of His love, whereas Ar Rahman shines upon all of the creation without discrimination. So, what I am understanding here is that Ar Rahman is a mercy for the person who is on an autopilot life, right? A person who hasn't yet awakened, perhaps, a person who is, and of course, we are also in a lot of states of being awakened and unawakened, and we are also in a lot of states of autopilot mindlessness at times. Mm, so what really makes sense to me is that whenever, as children we were taught that Ar Rahman is that mercy which is for everyone, but Ar Rahim is that mercy which is specific to to special people, right? Um, it works. I used to ask this question, but then Allah chooses the special people, doesn't He? And then the whole discussion on free will and destination comes in. But more and more, I'm starting to understand that while there is a qadar and things are determined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, um, biyadikal khair, everything is encompassed in His good hands, and inshallah, everything, it's His promise, is within His control, within His will, within His um, uh, you know decision of, like not a leaf falls without His permission. But the thing is that within the present moment, within every present moment, there is an opening for free will. Okay, within this moment right now, there is a portal which is open for me to change the direction of my life. And that discussion goes into the understanding that for Allah there is no time and space, because Allah is beyond time and space. So a lot of scholars will say that um, for Allah, the work is happening in the present moment. And in the present moment, if we awaken and we are in a state of remembrance of Allah, connecting to Him, relying on Him, um, creating a creating an awakened response to our um, life instead of just reaction on an autopilot, then we are entering that present moment of awakenedness, where we can open our hearts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and become deserving of this special mercy of Ar Rahim. So the present moment therefore becomes the moment of accessing this name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is Ar Rahim, because it is a specific mercy which surrounds all of us. But am I going to open my cup to receive? Am I going to open my door to receive this special mercy? Am I going to wake up from my slumber and start to have an experience of life and God, which is very different from the one I would have had in a state of slumber? So, somebody who's sleeping and somebody who's awake, we can imagine the difference in their experience of the same gifts of life, right? And the journey of the wayfarer, the journey of the seeker of God, is the journey that is then pegged with this name of God, Rahim. Um, and so we realize that the same calamities or the same tragedies or the same good fortunes and the same experiences of life will then look very different for somebody who is not awakened and somebody who is awakened, right? And what does awakening look like? Awakening will entail a few things. Awakening will entail, number one, a certain connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moment to moment, on a moment to moment basis, where one is able to access a faith in a God which is in the present moment. Not somebody who created you and left you, not somebody who will meet you on the day of judgment tomorrow, not somebody who's put you in a trial and then left you and saying, oh, I'm going to watch you how you do. And a lot of times we, unfortunately, as children, were taught as if, with the ayat of the Quran where Allah says that, it will be filled, the hell will be filled with, and the hell will say, hal min mazid, like, is there any more? And all these, literal and direct understandings of such ayat that are made so prominent in our journey to God that they start to create fear and stifle us in our journey. And so, what we're trying to understand here is that when we go back to the present moment, and we start doing the journey in the present moment, we start to access a certain faith with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is not tarnished by the fact that, first of all, we were taught this wrong image of God. We now know that His mercy is always surrounding us, it's always accessible. We're the ones who can create these blockages for ourselves. And during the week, I was also asked about the concept of hell. And somebody had asked this question, that if someone, because I constantly say that our inner states determine our akhirah, the state of our akhirah, right? And akhirah has to be accessed now because this dunya is in the womb of the next realm, right? They're all within the wombs of each other. So while we're in this dunya, we're also in the higher realms. It's just a matter of unveiling and accessing. So somebody asked me a question, that if I am going through depression, does that mean that I'm doomed, that my akhirah is hellish? And what if I can't get out of it? And my answer to that was that all of our mystics, not just Muslim, but Zen masters, people in the monasteries, in the ashrams, when they embark on a journey of self discovery and exploration towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will all come to these stages and phases of mental, psychological, emotional darkness and trauma, because this is the qabz and bust, this is the contraction and expansion. And so, in order for us to understand this, we realize that even masters like Eckhart Tolle was at the brink of a suicidal attempt or extremely suicidal, when his life turned around, when he had this epiphany and awakening and opening. I had also mentioned earlier that Carolyn Myss, in his book, The Anatomy of the Spirit, mentions how in the ashrams and the monasteries, you would see that these seekers go through intense phases of darkness before they come out. But now they have a teacher to guide them through it, a spiritual teacher, and a realization and an awakened sense of understanding, this is part of my journey. So don't get intimidated. This is the nature of my being. This is the nature of my creation. I am made of dark and light. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the creation of Adam. He says He created him with in the translations, it says black clay. And so there is this, understanding of, a lot of people have interpreted it in different ways, but what one can say is that the earthly part of our constitution has a tendency to gravitate towards negativity. There's a talk on YouTube, it's a TED talk, where this lady has done her research to explain how a human being will directly, as a first notion, as a first reaction to a situation, become negative. So she says that we are negative by default, and I think you'll find the talk as a TED talk called "We Are Negative by Default." And so what she's trying to explain to us is to normalize that, yes, by nature and by default, we become negative. And that becomes our growing ground. That becomes our place of opening, of overcoming, of accepting challenges, of becoming the observer of this earthly body and saying, yes, this is my journey that I'm going to go through. And so, coming back to our discussion on not doing life as a black and white life, is that if we are going to get into the black and white and constantly do life as a right and wrong, then we completely forget the point of who we are. As human beings, we are so complex. We cannot call ourselves a black and white being. And when we go into that black and whiteness of it, we start to create a judgment, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. And what that does is that we start putting people into boxes. And I want to share here a moment in my life where I felt like a change was triggered in the way I was perceiving life, God, and all of these things. Was I was talking to my daughter about hijab, I think, or heaven or hell or something. And we were on our way to school, and she was hardly 5. And because we have a tendency, right, to have these discussions at a very young age. Um, I know for myself that for me, that discussion was coming from a place of fear, because the fear was my child will get lost in this world, my child will forget her values, my child will, get distracted, go astray. And again, what we had discussed last week, that if we don't instill trust within ourselves and within our children, then how can our children learn to trust themselves or the world? And you cannot box yourself in a room. You cannot cage yourself in a room and say, I'm not going to go out and interact with people, um, because the world is a bad place and everybody's here to get to me, or here to destroy my religion, or here to, all of these ideas of inferiority, superiority that comes from black and whiteness. So I was talking to my daughter, and I'm in the car, and I'm talking to her, and children can really open our eyes. And she turned around and she said, Mama, my teachers in school, will they also go to hell? And I said, Why are you saying that? And she said, Because she doesn't cover. And suddenly I realized something was not right. Because how can I create a judgment in a child's mind from such a young age for a human being who's teaching her? There has to be respect for another human being. And covering or not covering is a private action. And whatever religion she belongs to, am I to judge what is going to be her, relationship with God? Do I know anything? Am I in a place to do that? And then the Holy Prophet is constantly telling us that, our actions depend on our intentions. Now, I don't know anyone's intentions in the world. That means I don't have the right to judge their actions at all, because I can never access their intention. And the Prophet is saying, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that your actions depend on your intentions. That makes just this one hadith makes anyone's spiritual journey so personal, because we can never access their intention. And in that moment, I knew I had a journey ahead of me in finding my answers, because I didn't, because everything till then was very black and white for me. But you see, the compass that Allah has put in our hearts, which we discussed last week, that He has put it in on our hearts. This Rahman and Rahim is the intrinsic nature. So what that does is that sometimes when we allow it to speak to us, it can really trigger a movement within us. It completely transforms it. It changed the trajectory of our journey. And in that moment, I said, I will need some answers now. What am I going to tell my child? What am I going to explain to her? How will I reconcile my belief systems and whatever I have learned with a basic humanity, a basic respect? I don't want to create a world where um, we're constantly judging each other and creating opinions about people. And of course, then um, a lot of work was done after that. There were a lot of questions in my mind after that, for which the journey kind of got triggered. But you see, there will be moments of spark in our lives where this happens. And what I want to address here is that this mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rahman and Rahim, which is the most oft repeated, as in it is the ayat Bismillah Rahman Rahim is before every surah. And a lot of scholars believe that Rahman and Rahim in this, they say that Bismillah Rahman Rahim is something which is different for each surah. So the Rahmaniya and the Rahimiya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is being mentioned before each surah, is specific to that surah. And what I understand of it is that each surah is enveloped, bubbled in Allah's special mercy. And I don't know if I've said it before, and I hope I'm not repeating myself too much, but there was a realization that we are so scared of reading the Quran sometimes. We are so, in this place of feeling scared, feeling fear. But Allah knows our default nature, right? Which I just said, that by default we are negative. By default, we go into our downward spiral of negativity. So, what Allah has done is that before every surah, He's reminding us to wake up and put ourselves and our perception and our lenses of looking at what we're going to read in this particular surah all over again in the lens of mercy. He's reminding us, look, by nature you are negative. Okay, wake up. Go to my positivity. Go to my mercy. Go to my love. And it's so profound, this realization that Allah has chosen these two names before every surah of the Quran, and then mentioned it, of course, again in Surah Al-Fatiha. This emphasis coming from Him towards His mercy is such a mercy itself that it works on us in a very psychological way. It reminds us that despite the fact that we may have had parents who were very disciplining, very right and wrong, very black and white, uh, dismissive of us as children because we didn't do well in studies, or we didn't clear the table, or we didn't respect our elders enough, or whatever. And a lot of us grew up with their love being contingent on how well we performed, right? And our parents are our first experience of divinity because they are the first rub. They're bringing us up. And what that has done for a lot of us is that it has made us seeking and yearning of God's love through performance. And a lot of times we don't realize, but this is the deeper work, the subtle work in our intentions. That when we do this work, it's something which I found true for myself, but I'm just speaking, I can only speak on my behalf, so I can't speak on anyone's behalf. But perhaps it's a human tendency that when we get into this understanding that my performance will determine the love I receive, and because intrinsically we're always needy of love, we may start doing good actions, saying per se that I'm doing it for God because we're seeking God's love and approval and validation and acceptance. But you see, the subtle thing about that intention is that it was again for my own want of validation. So my destination became validation. My destination became acceptance. My destination of doing a particular good act, for example, I'm setting up a lemonade stand in the heat as a sabil. And I want to fill that void within me that's constantly nagging at me and saying, you're not good enough for God. You're not worthy of Jannah. You're not, and to fill in that void, I go over and above my own inner voice of doing good. And I do so much good because it sort of feeds me and keeps me at bay before I can go and look at the real me who is underneath all of this good action on the outside. So I hope I'm able to convey, but it's a very subtle point that when we start to see God as black and white, then we see a God who will only love us when we do good. And so that goodness of action then becomes my need as a child to be loved and accepted. And that action then loses its intrinsic effect on my soul, right? One more thing I want to say over here is that um, somebody asked me this question saying that, what if I'm doing all my actions, but my actions are serving my ego? And what if they're all going to waste? Then what will happen, right? We will always be in the clause of ego because that's our life, unless Allah decides at some point And that happens with very rare saints. And it's not impossible, and we don't know who amongst us is a saint. We don't know. I had a helper in my house. She was a nanny for my son, and she dreamt of Holy Prophet when her father died. And it was such a beautiful moment for me to understand that Allah's mercy is so fair, that this lady who had never ever read a book, she didn't even know how to read and write. Her connection, her spiritual connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond all of this. Right? So that was off tangent. But we don't know who is at that stage of getting rid of the ego, but we are all in we're all in that process of being in an egoic state. They're just different stages, right? Some are more, some are less. And we don't want to bash ourselves and put ourselves down for saying, well, what if my actions were wrongly aligned? What if my intentions were wrongly aligned? What if, I was trying to fill in the bucket of good deeds, but it went into my bad deeds, kind of thing. We start to do these calculations. And then a lot of us, especially in these COVID times, are going through a lot of anxiety. And a lot of these thoughts, they spiral out of control and they snowball into deeper anxieties and deeper feelings of insecurity, of not being loved, of not being held, of not being mostly supported. What we want right now is to be supported, because intrinsically we run after stability and certainty and predictability. And when we go into this work, then the predictability starts to go away, because now you're in a place of unknown, right? You're doing this unknown work on yourself. And so what I'm trying to say is that yes, we are striving, we're doing these actions, and yes, they may be serving our egoic selves, but again, coming back to that core thing the Holy Prophet is reminding us of, it depends on your intention. Your intention, yes, it will also get purified with time, but per se, if you're doing anything, your intention is what? Your growth, and you're seeking God. And it's a sincere intention. And yes, with time, intentions also get more and more sincere, and with time, intentions also get purified. But we have to feel this support within the non black and whiteness of God, right? A God who is not just giving us because we are seeking it, a God who is not just holding us because we're asking Him to. He is by nature the supporting one. That's who He is. And we are in His kingdom. And when, in the Quran, the tone is that, can you leave my kingdom? If you want, can you exit, can you escape the kingdom of God? I grew up, and the way I was taught this ayat was like, oh, you're so, people are so rebellious, or human beings are so rebellious, and if you want to go, like, try and go and escape this kingdom. But look at it from the perspective again of mercy. If we say, if you really feel that Rahman and Rahim, Bismillah Rahman Rahim, and then we read this ayat, and then we say, no, the person who's talking this ayat to me, the entity that is explaining this concept to me, is super loving and merciful, is super caring, is super like in love with me. What is he trying to say? And what he's trying to say is that no matter what happens, whether your intentions, you don't know what they are, and whether you don't know what your sincerity is like, and you're confused, and there's turmoil and all of that, just remember, you will never be able to escape the kingdom of my mercy. You won't. You can't. You're just in it, and I won't let that happen. And that can fill us with such immense and deep sense of security that no matter what I do, it's impossible for me to escape His kingdom of mercy. And so, with this understanding, we come to a place again back where we were talking about Ar Raheem and this opening of the heart and acceptance in a moment where we are regretful, remorseful, ashamed, feeling guilty. And if we can put these two names together, Ar Rahman as the unconditional mercy, which Allah is saying it is beyond human and earthly limitation, and then come to a place of Rahim, which is the mercy that is for those who open their hearts, then we start to access this very beautiful place within ourselves, which is all about um, not being conditional. It is number one saying Allah is already loving me and I'm in his womb of love unconditionally, no matter what I do. But then to have the courage and then say, let me now open my heart and see all of that I'm scared of looking at, all of the darkness that is there, all of those places I don't feel like going. Um, and and that's where the wakefulness comes in, right? The Rahim is the one who is in an awakened heart, in the present moment, in the awakened moment, where the wisdom flows in, where in the present moment we're able to access that place where we can have a direct understanding of what is the right thing for me to do in this present moment with a sense of presence. I'm just going to take 2 seconds. I just give me a break for just 2 seconds. I'm going to be back. Sorry, there were these noises that were distracting me. So, yeah, coming back to Rahim and the present moment, we are now understanding that perhaps in that moment when I was talking to my daughter, there was a present moment pause and not an autopilot way of shrugging things under the carpet and just giving the general answers that we hear, and what, and then just doing life as a um, predictable thing. A lot of times when we also hear this ayat of the Quran, like Rahafidin, there is no force in religion, for example, um, it's a very general sentence that I've heard from most people, who would say, well, no, there is force in religion, even the Quran is saying it, but what you hear is that uh, there is force, but there is no force in choosing religion. But once you're within the religion, once you're within the fold of Islam, then there's no freedom. Then Islam is not a buffet table, and you can't be picking and choosing things, and you can't be like this picky eater, and you have to take it all, right? Again, that makes things black and white. Again, it makes things so robotic. If we were really robots, then we could do this black and white. If we were really robots, if we could really be okay with everything as it is, then there wouldn't be any difference in opinion. There wouldn't be so many sects in Islam. There wouldn't be any difference in interpretations and all of that. And while Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling all of us that I have created you as Khalifatullah, right? We are all holding that light within us as individuals in our own individual paths as um, the light of God, as representatives made in his image. We are also told at the same time to submit to certain authorities all the time, which kind of stifles our own voice, which kind of stifles our own understanding and that questioning mind, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Quran is constantly saying, Afala yatadabbarun, Afala yaqilun, Afala yatafakkarun, right? Why don't you think? Why don't you do tadabbur? Why don't you do contemplation? Why don't you ask questions? You know what Imam Ali is saying, like Saluni, Saluni. Like, why aren't you asking these questions? And again, when we go into the place where we try to put things into boxes, what starts to happen is that eventually we can just check a list of things and say, these are done, now I'm going to heaven, right? Like, this is black and white, I'm going to heaven now. And where's the growth then? Where is the complexity of my journey? How can I be a different person tomorrow when I've already decided that this is the end of my journey? I've already done all of these things, right? Because they were black and white, they were in a checklist. I did, yes, I'm doing it. But the beauty of this life is that Allah will keep throwing things at us which will want to make us question. And I would like to invite myself, along with all of you, to use these moments as moments of being in the in that inescapable kingdom of God's mercy, in the good hands of God, and use these moments to have the courage to question beyond the normal, question it beyond what is taught, question it from deep part of your heart. Ask your questions, open your heart, and be ready that even if it's going to be scary, even if it's going to be something you don't know, even if you don't know where it will take you, remember you are in the good hands of God, you are in the kingdom of God. And being in the present moment of being being able to access this mercy of God which is in the present moment now entails that when you do something courageous for your soul, remember that when it will take you to a difficult valley, even in that valley, there will be a present moment. And even in that present moment, there will be immense mercy of Allah holding us. What I'm trying to tell you is that this is how we can have a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we're in this present moment and we find the courage and faith to take a step and ask a question or do something which we've never done before, not only do we become the co-creators of our life, not only do we start trusting ourselves as Khalifatullahs, not only do we emulate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's qualities to a much more maximum place, but we also come to a place of having a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this present moment. And saying, for example, if you're making a prayer and you want something and you in that moment find the courage to ask for it, which you never did. For example, you never got to study, mm, for example, knitting. You wanted to study knitting. You had a passion for it. I know somebody who's really passionate about knitting over here. Um, and the world thinks this is such a silly thing. Like, why would you want to consider knitting as your profession? But you want it to. And your heart jumps with joy at the idea of knitting, for example, and you want to do it. In that present moment, if you can find the courage to even pray, to be even willing to ask that God of infinite mercy, that God, I would really like that. What the part of us that prevents us from doing that is the fear that what if it doesn't come true? And if it doesn't come true, then I'll be heartbroken and then I'll be resentful towards the people who didn't let me, and there will be resistance, and it'll be a whole mess all over again, right? But remember that maybe earlier on when we were making those du'as or we were seeking or yearning, we weren't in an awakened state. We weren't who we are today. We weren't in that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that husni dhan billah, in that good opinion of God that we are right now. And so it's different. It's not the same anymore. Even if you're making the same dua that you did 5 years ago, and if your heart is still yearning for it. So when you're in this present moment and you find the courage to make that dua or yearn for something good, remember that now you're doing life with a new intention of doing it in the present moment. And so in this present moment, there is 100% potential and possibility for Allah to listen to that dua. And while I can have a fear of the future, I will choose to stay in the present moment. And as the present moments will progress, even in the future, when I am in a place where it may not come through, I know that in that present moment, God will open my heart to his faith in such a way that the pain is not going to be the same as it was the earthly pain of disappointment that I was earlier. There will be growth in it. This dua, this desire in my heart will become a ladder for my soul to grow. which was never my intention earlier. Earlier it was just a dua for that thing itself, and then I didn't get it, and then my attachments created a lot of turmoil within me. But now it's a deeper journey. Now it's a moment to moment journey. Now it's a journey of faith over fear. Now it's a journey where I do realize God's power. I do have more faith in His wisdom, and I know that moment to moment I'm being held. I hope that I'm able to express this, and I'm not repeating myself again and again. Um, but do you have any questions? Was I confusing? If I can just be told to repeat something if it wasn't clear, or I could. Okay, thanks, Fatima. Okay, that's reassuring. So I'm gonna read on a little bit and see where it takes us. We just have like a few minutes to go. Uh, Sufism is the longing to throw ourselves into this wave and to let it sweep us back to our infinite source, our boundless origin. For most believers, only the water left uh, behind in the hollows matters, namely the outer form of religion. Yet the Sufis want to understand, to know, to love unconditionally. They use the outer form in order to comprehend the inner, uniting the wisdom. So you see, in a way, it's the outer religion and the queries about it, for me personally, became a means to a deeper look into deeper questions of life, right? About respecting people, about just that moment that I had with my daughter. It was about an outer religious thing, right? It was about head covering, but it led me into a whole new way of looking at judgmentalism and acceptance and uniting with the world, and not going into a place of separation and separate identities, like I am this and you are this, right? I don't want to do that. And so this is saying that same thing, that we want to jump into these waves, right? And I was at the beach a few days back, and I was noticing that when the water is calm and the waves come to the shore, you know, they're a little wild, and the wave, comes up, and then by the time it reaches the shore, it's like it's settled, right? It becomes straight for a little while, and just for those few seconds, that turmoil has settled, and then you see that it starts to pull back, go again, and another wave comes. And as long as we stay at the shore, as long as we stay at the shallow end of the ocean, life will always be about this going forward, backward, turmoil, settled, smooth, rough. Life becomes like this constant. But when we decide to go deeper, like I said, have the courage to go deeper. If you go beyond these waves into the ocean and go dive deep, under that water, there is no turmoil because you've gone deep, right? So, on the shallow end of our uh, journey, things will always create an inner turmoil. But what starts to happen when we decide to take this leap of faith and dive in to the deeper part of the ocean? Then, yes, there will always be turmoil on the outside. The turmoil goes on the outside. But we come to a place of this deeper security where the outer turmoil stops it stops disrupting our inner peace. And while the outer turmoil continues, the inner being can just be an observer of it, in the good hands of God, in the kingdom of God's mercy, and carry on its journey in this security, and not get affected by what's going on the outside, right? And that comes from a place of being present in the present moment with an open heart, having the courage, feeling the security and the support. Um, for most believers only, the water left behind in the hollows matters, namely the outer form of religion. Yet the Sufis want to understand, to know, to love unconditionally. They use the outer form in order to comprehend the inner, uniting wisdom. We human beings carry in us much pain and loneliness and a deep need to be free. Most of us react to unpleasant experiences by blocking our feelings. But our feelings are the connection between body and spirit. When we block them and they become stiff, we hamper the natural flow of energy, thus preventing ourselves from developing and maturing. So I will end the session here, and I will make a dua, and then I will open the floor if there's any feedback or questions. Um, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Oh Allah, we come to you as weak and lost, confused, and yearning. So all we have to offer, Ya Allah, is our yearning. You know, we are here, and my beautiful friends here, we are all making this time to know ourselves better, to address the restlessness within ourselves that is constantly pushing us in the right direction, to seek you and to seek self discovery and to seek self understanding. Ya Allah. Ya Allah, it is our insecurity and fear from where I am talking to you. Ya Allah, don't let us go empty handed. Ya Allah. I know you don't. I know you don't. I know you will never send us back empty handed, Ya Allah. But I seek you as a beggar. I seek of you as someone who is lacking in faith, someone who is insecure, someone who wants to feel held and supported. Ya Allah, show me your face of support and love and mercy. Such a beautiful face, Ya Allah, that I would never forget it in all my moments, especially my moments of loneliness, hurt, and pain. Ya Allah, enable me to use all of these moments to come closer and closer to you and be able to change and transform and to feel that harkat and that motion in my heart that I so yearn, Ya Allah. Do not leave me stagnant, Ya Allah. Do not leave me motionless. Help me, Ya Allah, because I'm a seeker and I have no power. I have no power. I cannot do this myself. I know I have no power. Oh Allah, heal this world that is suffering. Oh Allah, heal our pain. Oh Allah, give us the insight and the light to be helpful healers. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of your last Savior and enable us to be His helpers. Ameen.